The courtroom was dead silent. Not the kind of quiet that feels peaceful. The kind that presses down on your chest and makes it hard to breathe. I was sitting at a table that felt too small, in a room that felt too large, wearing the blazer my sister Joanna had ironed twice that morning, because her hands didn't know what else to do. Across the aisle, maybe 12 feet away, sat my husband of 11 years. Marcus. 44 years old. Corporate attorney. The most composed man I had ever met in my life. He leaned over to his lawyer, said something low, and then he smiled. Not at the judge. Not at the room. At me. And then he whispered 4 words across that aisle like they were the most casual thing in the world. "You're getting nothing, Claire." I didn't respond. I looked straight ahead. But my hands, I had to press them flat against my thighs to stop them from shaking. Before we continue with this video, please like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Here's what you need to know about me. My name is Claire. I'm 38 years old. 6 years ago, I walked away from a marketing career I had spent a decade building because my husband said we didn't need 2 incomes. He said, "Your job is us." And I believed him. I built our entire life, managed our home, raised our 2 kids, handled every appointment, every school form, every logistical detail of a family of 4, while Marcus climbed. And now I was sitting in a courtroom while he told a judge that life we built together was entirely his. His lawyer, Richard, 55, silver-haired, the kind of man who makes you feel guilty for being in the room, had a stack of documents that reframed 11 years of marriage into a clean, simple story. Marcus earned it. Claire didn't. The business, the investments, the accounts. All his. What he was offering me was the house, heavily mortgaged, and a support figure that wouldn't cover childcare for our 2 kids, Lily and Noah. He had called it generous. I had called my sister and cried for an hour. But here's the thing Marcus didn't know that morning. The thing he had spent 8 months trying to prevent anyone from knowing. There was a file sitting in front of the judge. A thick, manila folder that my attorney Dana had submitted 72 hours earlier. I didn't know everything that was inside it. Not yet. What I did know was this. The moment the judge opened it, everything Marcus had built his case on was going to collapse. And somewhere underneath all that fear, underneath the shaking hands and the too small table, I was ready. To understand what happened in that courtroom, you have to understand what Marcus spent 6 years making me believe about myself. It didn't happen all at once. That's the thing nobody tells you about that kind of marriage. There's no single moment you can point to and say, "There, that's where it started." It's slower than that. Quieter. It happens in the way someone sighs when you suggest something. In the way they correct you in front of other people and then squeeze your hand afterward like it was affectionate. In the way they say, "I'm just being honest with you, babe," so many times that honesty starts to feel like something being done to you rather than something shared between you. Marcus was brilliant and certain, and, in the beginning, that certainty felt like safety. We met when I was 26. I was 3 years into a marketing role at a mid-sized firm, ambitious, good at my job. He was 32, already a junior partner, the kind of man who walked into rooms and immediately understood their power structure. Our first year together was electric. He was attentive, generous, sure of everything, including me. We got married when I was 27. Lily came 2 years later. And somewhere in that first year of new motherhood, exhausted and underwater, Marcus suggested the idea that would quietly reshape the next 6 years of my life. "You don't have to do this to yourself," he said one night, watching me answer work emails at midnight with a 4-month-old asleep on my chest. "I make enough. More than enough. Let me take care of it. Your job is us." It sounded like love. I handed in my notice 8 weeks later. For a while, it was fine. More than fine. I was good at running our home the same way I'd been good at running campaigns, systematically, attentively, with an eye for details other people missed. Marcus traveled for work. I managed everything else. When Noah came along 18 months after Lily, I found a rhythm. But somewhere around year 4, something shifted. Marcus started referencing my career in the past tense in ways that felt pointed. Claire used to work in marketing at dinner parties, with a small smile that the other guests probably didn't catch. Comments about purchases I made, even small ones that had a subtle edge. Did we talk about that? Suggestions that I wouldn't understand the financial decisions he was making because I'd been out of the game too long. I started second-guessing myself. That was the design, I think, though I couldn't have named it then. When things between us finally broke, and they broke badly, over a weekend in February that I won't detail here because my kids might someday watch this, Marcus moved out and immediately moved faster than I thought possible. Joint accounts frozen. Assets reclassified. And a narrative carefully distributed to our social circle. Claire was struggling. Claire had become unstable. Claire wasn't equipped to handle the financial realities of a separation. People believed him. He was a lawyer. He was calm. He was convincing. And I was exhausted and angry and coming apart at the seams in the way anyone does when 11 years of their life suddenly restructures itself around a courtroom date. It was my sister Joanna who told me to stop. Do not sign a single thing he puts in front of you, she said. Not one page. And it was my attorney Dana who told me, 6 weeks into our working relationship, to be patient. She had submitted a financial disclosure request to Marcus's firm. They were fighting it. Why would they fight it that hard, she said, almost to herself. Unless there's something in there worth hiding? I didn't have an answer then. But 3 weeks before the hearing, Dana called me at 7 in the morning. I knew from the time alone that something had changed. Claire, she said, he hid the money. A husband hiding money in a divorce isn't uncommon. Attorneys will tell you it happens in more cases than anyone wants to admit. A deferred bonus here. An undervalued asset there. Small manipulations that are difficult to prove and easy to dismiss as accounting differences or timing coincidences. What Marcus did was not small. And it had been hiding in plain sight for years. Dana didn't give me everything on that phone call. She was careful, methodical in the way I had come to rely on even when it frustrated me. What she told me was that she had brought in someone, a forensic accountant named Gerald, 58 years old, former IRS investigator, the kind of man who finds a missing dollar the way a bloodhound finds a scent, not loudly, not dramatically, just inevitably. Gerald had been working quietly for 7 months. What he found was a pattern, not an accident, not a coincidence, a deliberate, carefully constructed pattern that Marcus, an attorney who understood exactly how asset division worked in a divorce, had begun building before he ever moved out of our house. Let me explain what that means in plain terms because when Dana walked me through it, I had to ask her to slow down twice. Marcus was a named equity partner in his firm. That equity, his ownership stake, was worth significant money. But the valuation he submitted to the court listed the business interest at just under $200,000. A modest number. A dismissible number. Gerald's investigation told a very different story. Marcus had been systematically routing revenue through a shell consulting company, a separate entity, quietly established, that existed almost entirely on paper. Contracts flowed through it. Fees were processed through it. And the income that passed through that shell never cleanly surfaced on the personal financial documents Marcus submitted to the court. On top of that, Marcus had arranged for his bonuses, substantial, annual, contractually guaranteed, to be deferred, held back, timed almost precisely, to fall outside the window of the marriage. When Gerald mapped it all out chronologically, the timeline was damning. Marcus had begun restructuring his financial paper trail approximately 14 months before he filed for divorce. 14 months. Which meant that while I was still in our house, still making school lunches and scheduling pediatric appointments and believing, truly believing, that my marriage might survive its rough patch, my husband was already engineering my financial erasure. I remember sitting at my kitchen table when Dana explained that last part. The kids were at Joanna's. The house was completely quiet, and I felt something move through me that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite grief. It was something colder. The specific feeling of realizing that the person who knew you best had been using that knowledge against you. Dana's voice brought me back. The good news, she said, is that Gerald found the thread. And once you find the thread, you pull it. The thread was a third-party financial services company Marcus used, a vendor his own legal team hadn't thought to include in their protective wall of blocked disclosures. Gerald subpoenaed their records independently. Marcus's attorneys couldn't stop it in time. And those records, cross-referenced with Gerald's timeline, with the shell company filings, with the deferred compensation agreements, told the complete story. That was what was in the file. Gerald's final asset calculation, once everything hidden was accurately accounted for, put the true marital estate at $3.8 million. Marcus had told the court it was $900,000. The difference, nearly $3 million, was what he had built his entire case around Claire deserving none of. In court, Richard presented Marcus's version with the smooth confidence of a man who has won this particular kind of argument before. Claire was a non-contributing spouse. The business was underperforming. The settlement offered was, in Richard's word, generous. I watched people in the gallery nod. I watched Marcus sit straight-backed and composed and completely certain. And then Dana stood up. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't perform. She simply turned to the judge and asked her, quietly, almost conversationally, to reference Exhibit 14C in the file. Across the aisle, I saw Richard's posture shift. Just slightly. Just enough. Marcus still didn't look at me. But his hands, I knew his hands. I had watched them for 11 years. And they went completely, unnaturally still on the table in front of him. Judge Osei, 57 years old, precise, and entirely unbothered by polished male attorneys, flipped to Exhibit 14C. And then she began to read. For minutes passed. Maybe 5. The room was the kind of silent that has weight. Then she set down her glasses, looked up from the file, and said, not to Richard, not to the room, but directly to my husband. Mr. Hargrove, I'd like you to explain something to me. And Marcus, the most prepared man I had ever known, had no answer ready. What happened next lasted maybe 12 minutes. It felt like 12 years. Judge Patricia Osei was not a dramatic woman. That was the first thing Dana had told me about her when we drew her courtroom. She doesn't perform, Dana said. She doesn't grandstand. She just reads everything. She misses nothing, and she has absolutely no patience for people who treat her courtroom like a negotiating table. Watching her now, I understood exactly what Dana meant. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't lean forward or make sharp gestures or do any of the things you see in courtroom dramas that signal something important is happening. She simply began methodically, unhurriedly, laying out the discrepancies between Marcus's declared financials and what Exhibit 14C contained. One by one, like someone setting stones on a table, each one heavier than the last. The Shell Consulting Company, the timing of its establishment, the revenue routed through it that never surfaced on Marcus's personal disclosures, the deferred bonuses, the contractual documentation confirming they were guaranteed, the suspicious precision of their timing relative to the filing date, the gap, the extraordinary, undeniable gap between a business interest declared at $200,000 and the third-party records suggesting a true value closer to $2.1 million. Richard attempted to reframe twice. The first time, Judge Osei let him finish and then continued as though he hadn't spoken. The second time, she stopped him mid-sentence. I've read the filing, counselor. I'm asking your client. The room went still in a new way after that. Marcus was asked to take the stand. I watched him stand, button his jacket, a reflex, pure muscle memory, the man preparing to perform, and walk to the witness chair with the measured steps of someone reminding himself to appear calm. He was good. I'll give him that. Even then, even with Gerald's documentation laid out in front of a federal judge, Marcus was controlled and articulate and precise. The Shell Company was a legitimate business structure, he said. The deferred compensation was a normal arrangement, common in his industry. Judge Osei nodded slowly and asked for the documentation supporting that arrangement. The pause that followed was only 4 seconds long. I counted. The final ruling came 6 weeks later. I was in my kitchen when Dana called, 7:43 in the morning, kids already at school, coffee going cold on the counter because I'd forgotten to drink it. She didn't make me wait. 54% of the accurately valued marital estate. Full primary custody of Lily and Noah, with structured visitation for Marcus. 7 years of spousal support, calculated not against what I had earned when I left my career, but against what a professional with my experience and trajectory would reasonably be earning now, a distinction Dana had argued for and won. I thanked her. I'm not sure I said it properly. I'm not sure words were working correctly in that moment. I went and sat in my car in the driveway. I didn't cry. I had expected to cry. Instead, I just sat there in the quiet with my hands in my lap and let it be real. Let the weight of the last 14 months, the frozen accounts and the whisper campaign, and the settlement I almost signed and the 4-second pause on the witness stand, let all of it mean what it actually meant now. It was over. And I had not lost. But I want you to understand what happened after. Because the story doesn't end with a ruling. The State Bar opened a formal ethics investigation into Marcus within 3 weeks of Judge Osei's referral. It became a matter of public record. His firm placed him on administrative leave pending the outcome, quietly, but in a city where everyone in the legal community knows everyone else, not quietly enough. Richard declined to represent him in the bar proceedings. Marcus had to find new counsel. I only learned that detail 4 months later, from Joanna, who had heard it from a mutual acquaintance with the barely contained satisfaction of someone who had been right about a person for a very long time. The appeal Marcus filed against the asset ruling was reviewed and denied. The mutual friends who had spent months repeating his narrative, that Claire was unstable, that Claire was unreasonable, that Claire didn't understand the finances, went quiet first, and then, one by one, reached out to me. Some with explanations, some with apologies, some just with a text that said, I should have called sooner, and nothing else. I responded to most of them. Not all. Lily and Noah adjusted the way children do when the adults in their lives stop performing and start being honest, slowly, and then more steadily than you expect. I didn't speak badly of their father to them. I won't. But I stopped pretending things were fine when they weren't, and I think that honesty, more than anything else, is what gave them something solid to stand on. I went back to work. Not to my old firm. That chapter was closed, and I didn't need to reopen it. I joined a communications consultancy, mid-size, the kind of place where the ability to manage complexity and keep 15 things moving simultaneously was considered an asset rather than an afterthought. My first month, my manager told me I had the best organizational instincts she had seen in years. I didn't explain where those instincts came from. I just said thank you. 8 months after the ruling, I was sitting in the 3rd row of my daughter's school auditorium for the end-of-year play. Lily was playing a tree. Her own choice. She had campaigned for it specifically, and I had decided that was the most Lily thing she had ever done, and loved her ferociously for it. She found me from the stage before the lights went down. Scanned arose with the focused urgency of a 9-year-old with something important to confirm, and then, when she found me, her whole face changed. She gave me a wave. A small, certain, completely delighted wave. The kind that means you're here. And that's all I needed to know. I waved back. And I thought about the woman who had sat in a courtroom 11 months earlier with shaking hands and a blazer her sister had ironed twice. The woman who had almost signed a settlement because she was tired and scared and had been told, for long enough, in quiet enough ways, that she didn't understand things well enough to fight for them. Marcus had stood in front of a judge and said I deserved nothing. And for a long time before that courtroom, in ways I'm still understanding, he had worked very hard to make me agree with him. But that file, every document Dana had fought for, every thread Gerald had pulled, every number that told the true story of 11 years, it didn't just prove what I was owed. It proved I had never been nothing. He just needed me to believe I was. I don't anymore.